Welcome to CivilNet. My guest today, on the day before American elections, is David Stephenson, who is political officer at the U.S. Embassy in Armenia. David, thank you for being with us today.
Salpi, thanks so much for having me. Obviously, it's an exciting time to be here.
Is this your first election from Armenia?
It is my first U.S. election from Armenia.
And how many of you at the embassy voting from a distance?
Well, there are several American employees and several more, dozens of American family members, adult family members, who will also be voting from a distance from abroad, as we say.
You know, as you're voting from abroad, maybe it's more apparent to you or is it, that the American election, as much as it's an American election, is really an election that the whole world watches. Do you think Americans are really conscious of that as they go to the polls?
Well, I think it's definitely something that we feel more strongly when we're abroad, because we see the interest of people on the street and people we talk to about the American elections and how they feel that it affects them. You know, in America, we have a saying we hear quite a lot, that all politics is local. And it's been an old saying, and in some ways I think it still rings true, that people care most about the issues that impact them directly on a daily basis. But I do think there are certainly a lot of people who see America's place and care a lot about America's foreign policy in the world. And it's a question of, I think, prioritizing also which issues are most important to you.
You know, maybe this isn't the time to talk about foreign policy. We'll go back and talk about elections some more. But the business about all politics being local, I think at the end of the day, the fact that so much of American presence around the world, particularly in countries like Armenia, where the obvious strategic importance isn't that obvious, that we, not in America, are always amazed at the amount of interest that Americans take in countries around the world. How do you explain it really quickly to somebody who watches American politics, sees that really they're talking about economy and all these other things, yet the U.S. is right here doing so much in so many different areas? How do you explain that policy?
Well, I think in Armenia, as in many countries around the world, what we really want is partners. We want safe, prosperous, economically healthy partners. And we want that in so many countries around the world, and I think that explains.
The word healthy is a good word, not just healthy, but economically healthy, you said. In the US, these elections in particular, because they're so close perhaps, there's been a great deal of talk about voter inclusion, voter exclusion. Is that something that you think will continue to be a topic of concern in this high-tech age, or is it really a function of close elections?
No, I think people will continue to talk about American democracy. I mean, obviously we have over 200 years of history with democracy. Today, election days, tens of millions of Americans are going to get out to vote, not just for president, but for Senate, for Congress, for governors, for mayors, for races that are truly, truly local as well. And it's really a wonderful exercise in this big democratic experiment that we have. And I think we've learned. I mean, our democracy has evolved just like any democracy around the world, and I think we'll continue to see it evolve and continue to see issues like, how technology affects the ability to vote as we go forward.
I think that for countries like ours, when we're still grappling with elections being good, true, reflective, representative, in good faith, it almost helps to talk about the problems in the American electoral system. Because on the one hand, what you just said is so true. It works. And on the other hand, there really are problems. I just read recently that voting is not guaranteed in the US Constitution. The states guarantee it. And often you see attempts by various groups to exclude more of these guys and include more of those guys. And yet, for some reason, the system works. It works. What's at the basis of that?
Well, I think we have developed a very unique democracy over the years. Our Constitution is over 200 years old, and as you said, I mean, we have this history, we have a tradition of it working, of peaceful transitions of power. And honestly, I mean, you could point to a lot of different things, and I'm going to kind of give you a patriotic answer, if you will, that I look back to our first president, George Washington, who probably could have been president for life, could have been appointed dictator, ruler, king, whatever, but he chose to step down after 2 terms, and that was a precedent that lasted for 150 years, and a precedent that we still follow today. And him, I think, giving up that power has been very empowering for the American people.
The examples the concrete, specific examples from the American experience, I think, are often missing in countries like Armenia. You know, we see the big picture, we assume that stability and that tradition, and we forget that it came at great cost. America, on the one hand, is very pleased with its, you know, revolutionary roots, and on the other hand, simultaneously very pleased with all of its peaceful transitions. What do you think it is that we need to learn from that contradictory sort of experience?
Well, I think it's important to learn that you can evolve, you can change. I mean, the American democracy has changed. We've become more inclusive over time. I mean, you talked about high technology today, but you know, 200 years ago, women weren't allowed to vote. Property owners voted, white male property owners, and that has changed throughout the 200 years of time. And I think what is most important is that countries can change, democracies change, and hopefully they improve, and that it is a process, and you grow, and you improve that democratic process.
In this process of inclusion, ethnic groups in the United States have become far more active and far more consequential with their role. And as Armenian Americans also become more active, when you look at it from the American system perspective, do you think that's a good thing that there are all of these highly passionate, engaged groups, or is this a bad thing for American development and stability?
I think passionate, engaged groups are a wonderful thing for democracy, because the more information you have, the more aware you are, the more you want to enact change. I mean, that is in fact how you go about doing it in the American system, and I think that's a lesson that can be learned across the world. Even
if they're considered special interest groups?
Well, in a democracy, you have various special interest groups who can come together to discuss various issues. I mean, you'll have one side and the other side, and we do have freedom of speech, and we have the ability, equal access to, you know, elect our representatives and to help shape that debate. And I think that is part of the healthy democracy that we have.
You're going to watch the election returns tonight?
Absolutely. In the morning, actually.
Yes, in the morning. David Stephenson, political officer at the U.S. Embassy in Armenia, thank you for being with us. Happy Election Day? Absolutely. Is that said?
To you as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for watching CivilNet.